There exists a secret that transformed a failed 26-year-old Canadian man into the most influential personal development guru of the 20th century. Bob Proctor guarded this method for decades, revealing only fragments in his books and seminars. But recent research has discovered exactly what he did in private, away from public eyes, to create one of the most impossible transformations ever documented in human history. Prepare to discover the secret that billionaires use, but which was never taught in schools. Are you ready to know the truth behind the greatest transformation of the 20th century? Leave us a comment. Do you believe there are secrets that only the rich know? The hidden method of Napoleon Hill. In the winter of 1961, while most people saw Bob Proctor as a desperate former firefighter attempting to build a cleaning business with borrowed equipment, something far more significant was happening behind the closed doors of his modest Toronto apartment. Every morning at 5 a.m. before the city awakened, and while darkness still blanketed Queen Street East, Bob was engaged in a ritual that would prove to be the true foundation of his impossible transformation. The worn copy of Think and Grow Rich that lay open on his kitchen table was no ordinary book in Bob's hands. Where others read Napoleon Hill's words as inspiration or motivation, Bob had discovered something hidden beneath the surface, a coded methodology that Hill had embedded within seemingly simple concepts. Hill hadn't just written a book about success. He had created a manual for human reprogramming that few readers would ever fully decipher. The secret lay in Hill's careful study of America's wealthiest men, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and dozens of others who had achieved impossible levels of success during an era when such wealth seemed reserved for a chosen few. But what Hill discovered, and what he could only hint at in his published work, was that these men weren't just lucky or hard-working. They were practicing specific mental techniques that bordered on the supernatural in their effectiveness. Bob's breakthrough came when he realized that Hill's 13 principles weren't just philosophical concepts. They were precise instructions for altering brain function and consciousness. The chapter on desire wasn't about wanting something. It was about creating a specific neurological state that would compel the subconscious mind to identify and pursue opportunities that remained invisible to ordinary awareness. Carnegie himself had given Hill the key during their original meeting, though it was disguised as casual conversation. "The mind is everything," Carnegie had said. "Control the mind, and you control circumstances. Master the mind, and you master reality." But Carnegie had gone further, describing techniques that he claimed could reprogram human consciousness as surely as an engineer reprograms a machine. Bob began experimenting with these hidden methods, treating his own mind as a laboratory for testing Carnegie's claims. The morning ritual he developed was deceptively simple, but devastatingly effective. 30 minutes of what appeared to be meditation, but was actually a sophisticated form of consciousness engineering. The process began with breathing exercises designed to alter brainwave patterns, shifting Bob's consciousness from the beta state of normal waking awareness into the alpha and theta frequencies associated with deep meditation and creative insight. But Bob took this further than traditional meditation, using specific visualization techniques that Carnegie had described as mental rehearsal of future realities. In this altered state, Bob didn't just imagine success, he experienced it with all 5 senses, creating neural pathways in his brain that were identical to those formed by actual experience. His subconscious mind couldn't distinguish between these vivid mental rehearsals and real memories, gradually accepting his visualized success as established fact rather than hopeful fantasy. The transformation wasn't gradual, it was sudden and dramatic. Within weeks of beginning this practice, Bob's approach to his cleaning business changed completely. Where he had previously felt like he was begging for clients, he now approached potential customers with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his success was inevitable. His pricing strategies, his service delivery, his expansion plans, everything shifted to align with the millionaire identity he was creating in his morning sessions. But the most remarkable aspect of Bob's discovery was his growing understanding that the wealthy men Hill had studied weren't born with unusual abilities. They had learned specific techniques for accessing enhanced states of consciousness that dramatically increased their problem-solving capabilities, creative insights, and intuitive understanding of human psychology. The secret that Bob uncovered wasn't just about positive thinking or goal setting. It was about systematically reprogramming the operating system of human consciousness to function at levels that most people never imagined possible. Carnegie, Ford, Edison, and the others had discovered methods for upgrading their mental software, and Bob was beginning to understand exactly how they had done it. This hidden methodology explained why some people could achieve extraordinary results, while others, despite equal intelligence and effort, remained trapped in mediocrity. The difference wasn't talent or luck. It was access to techniques for optimizing human consciousness that had been kept secret for generations. The science behind the impossible. As Bob Proctor's cleaning business began to expand beyond his wildest projections, he became increasingly curious about the neurological mechanisms underlying his transformation. The morning ritual that had started as an experiment was producing results that seemed to violate the normal rules of business and personal development. Clients were approaching him rather than the reverse. Opportunities were appearing with supernatural timing, and his decision-making ability had become almost uncannily accurate. Bob's fascination with these phenomena led him to seek out cutting-edge research in neuroscience and consciousness studies, fields that were just beginning to understand the relationship between brainwave patterns and human performance. What he discovered would fundamentally change his understanding of human potential and provide the scientific foundation for the methods he would eventually teach to millions of people. The key lay in the discovery of theta brainwaves, electrical patterns in the brain that oscillate between 4 and 8 cycles per second. While most adults spend their waking hours in beta consciousness at 13 to 30 Hz, associated with analytical thinking and problem-solving, theta states represent a fundamentally different mode of consciousness that most people experience only briefly during the transition between waking and sleeping. But Bob had learned to access theta consciousness deliberately and sustain it for extended periods. In this state, the analytical mind becomes quiet, allowing deeper levels of awareness to emerge. Creative insights that would never occur during normal waking consciousness flow effortlessly. Intuitive understanding of complex situations becomes available. Most importantly, the subconscious mind becomes highly receptive to new programming and belief systems. What fascinated Bob was the realization that the world's most successful people, whether they understood the science or not, had all learned to access theta states regularly. Artists described it as flow. Athletes called it the zone. Entrepreneurs referred to it as gut instinct or intuitive knowing. But regardless of the terminology, they were all describing the same neurological phenomenon that Bob was learning to induce systematically. The scientific research revealed why Bob's morning visualization sessions had been so effective. In theta consciousness, the brain produces different neurotransmitters and hormones than during normal waking states. Levels of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins increase dramatically, creating feelings of confidence, clarity, and well-being that persist throughout the day. Meanwhile, stress hormones like cortisol drop to minimal levels, allowing for clearer thinking and better decision-making. Even more significantly, theta states are associated with increased neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and literally rewire itself. Bob's daily practice wasn't just changing his thoughts, it was changing the physical structure of his brain, creating new neural pathways that supported success-oriented thinking and behavior. But Bob's most important discovery was that theta consciousness could be induced through specific combinations of breathing techniques, visualization practices, and environmental conditions. The Tibetan monks who spent decades learning to access these states through meditation were using one approach, but Bob had found methods that could produce similar results in a fraction of the time. This scientific understanding transformed Bob's approach to personal development from hit-or-miss motivation to precise consciousness engineering. He began to see the human mind not as a fixed entity, but as a programmable system that could be optimized for specific outcomes through the systematic application of neuroscience principles. The implications were staggering. If theta states could be induced reliably and used to reprogram limiting beliefs and install success-oriented thought patterns, then extraordinary achievement wasn't a matter of talent or luck. It was simply a matter of using the right techniques to optimize consciousness for specific goals. Bob realized that he had stumbled upon something that could revolutionize human potential, but he also understood the dangers of sharing such powerful techniques without proper context and preparation. The same methods that could create extraordinary success could also be misused in ways that might prove destructive to unprepared individuals. What do you think about Bob's discoveries so far? Do you believe that there are scientific methods for enhancing human consciousness that aren't widely known? Have you ever experienced moments of unusual clarity or insight that seem to come from somewhere beyond your normal thinking? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The 7-step protocol. By 1963, Bob Proctor had refined his consciousness engineering techniques into a systematic protocol that he would use religiously for the next 60 years of his life. This wasn't the simplified version he would later teach in seminars or write about in books. This was the complete, unedited method that he considered his most valuable secret, worth more than all his business assets combined. The protocol consisted of 7 distinct steps, each designed to alter specific aspects of consciousness and neural function. Bob discovered that performing these steps in the correct sequence created a synergistic effect that was far more powerful than any individual technique practiced in isolation. Step 1. Neurological preparation. Bob began each session by altering his breathing patterns to induce specific brainwave states. Using a technique he called 4 to 7-8 breathing, he would inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, and exhale for 8, repeating this cycle until his brain shifted from beta to alpha frequencies. This wasn't simple relaxation. It was deliberate manipulation of his autonomic nervous system to create optimal conditions for consciousness reprogramming. Step 2. Environmental isolation. Complete sensory deprivation was essential. Bob would sit in his closet with the lights off, eliminating all visual and auditory stimuli that might interfere with the process. He discovered that the brain's default mode network, the mental chatter that dominates normal consciousness, could only be quieted through complete environmental isolation. Step 3. Identity dissolution and reconstruction. In the altered state created by the first 2 steps, Bob would systematically dismantle his current self-concept and rebuild it from scratch. He would visualize his old identity, the struggling former firefighter, literally dissolving like smoke, taking with it all associated beliefs, limitations, and expectations. Then he would construct a new identity with the precision of an architect designing a building. Step 4. Future memory installation. This was Bob's most sophisticated technique. Instead of simply visualizing future goals, He would create detailed memories of already having achieved them. Using all 5 senses, he would experience his successful future so vividly that his subconscious mind accepted these fabricated memories as real events that had already occurred. This created an internal certainty about his success that eliminated doubt and hesitation. Step 5. Emotional anchoring. Bob understood that memories without strong emotional content wouldn't create lasting change. He would deliberately generate intense feelings of gratitude, excitement, and satisfaction while experiencing his success memories, creating powerful emotional associations that would persist throughout his day and influence his behavior on subconscious levels. Step 6. Behavioral programming. While in the theta state, Bob would program specific behaviors and responses for challenging situations he might encounter. He would mentally rehearse difficult conversations, complex business decisions, and high-pressure scenarios, always seeing himself responding with the confidence and wisdom of the successful person he was becoming. Step 7. Integration and activation. The final step involved gradually returning to normal consciousness while maintaining access to the insights and certainty generated during the session. Bob would spend several minutes integrating his new programming with his existing personality, ensuring that the changes would be sustainable and wouldn't create internal conflict. This is where Bob Proctor's story connects directly to revolutionary neuroscience technology available today. What Bob achieved through years of disciplined practice and experimentation, modern science can now replicate through precisely engineered audio frequencies. Dr. James Rivers, a neuroscientist with connections to NASA, has developed the Genius Wave, a 7-minute audio program that uses advanced brain entrainment technology to induce the same theta states that Bob Proctor accessed through his intensive daily protocol. While Bob had to spend decades perfecting his consciousness engineering techniques, the Genius Wave offers immediate access to theta activation through scientifically designed sound frequencies. The program uses binaural beats, isochronic tones, and other audio technologies to guide your brain into the same frequency patterns that enabled Bob's extraordinary transformation. For just $39, you can download the same brainwave states that took Bob years to develop naturally. The program comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, allowing you to experience this breakthrough technology completely risk-free. The link is in the description below. Bob practiced this 7-step protocol every single day for 6 decades, treating it as non-negotiable as brushing his teeth. The cumulative effect was a complete transformation not just of his external circumstances, but of his fundamental identity and capabilities. He became, quite literally, a different person than the one who had started the practice. The results spoke for themselves. By 1965, Bob's annual income exceeded $1 million. By 1970, he had built a business empire spanning multiple industries and countries. But more important than the financial success was the internal transformation. Bob had become someone capable of achieving anything he could clearly visualize and systematically program into his consciousness. This protocol remained Bob's most closely guarded secret throughout his career. While he shared simplified versions of these techniques in his books and seminars, the complete system was reserved for his most advanced students and closest associates. He understood that such powerful methods required careful application and thorough understanding to avoid potential negative consequences. Thank you so much for staying with us this far in this revelation of Bob Proctor's most closely guarded secrets. Your engagement means everything to us, and I promise you, the most shocking revelations about what Bob never shared publicly are still ahead. What you've learned so far represents just the foundation of a consciousness engineering system that influenced millions of people while remaining hidden from general knowledge. The secrets he never revealed publicly. While Bob Proctor became famous for teaching the principles of success and the law of attraction, there were advanced techniques that he deliberately kept hidden from his public teachings. These methods were so powerful and potentially dangerous that Bob reserved them only for his private practice and a select few individuals who he felt could handle such intense consciousness manipulation responsibly. The first of these secret techniques was what Bob privately called reverse timeline revision. This involved using theta consciousness to literally rewrite traumatic or limiting memories from his past. While in deep meditative states, Bob would revisit significant negative experiences from his childhood and young adulthood. But instead of simply processing or accepting these memories, he would actively reconstruct them with different outcomes. For example, Bob would return to the day he dropped out of school after his thumb injury, but in these revised memories, he would see himself handling the situation with confidence and determination, using the setback as motivation for greater achievement. He discovered that by repeatedly experiencing these revised memories in theta consciousness, his subconscious mind would gradually accept the new versions as real, effectively erasing the limiting beliefs that had been created by the original traumatic events. This technique was based on Bob's understanding that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between real and vividly imagined experiences. By systematically replacing limiting memories with empowering ones, he could eliminate the psychological blocks that prevented most people from achieving their full potential. However, Bob realized that this method could be psychologically destabilizing if practiced incorrectly, which is why he never taught it publicly. The second secret technique was temporal projection decision-making. When facing important business or personal decisions, Bob would project his consciousness forward in time and experience the long-term consequences of different choices before making his decision. This wasn't simple visualization. It was a sophisticated form of mental time travel that allowed him to gather information from potential futures. Using this method, Bob could evaluate business investments, partnership opportunities, and strategic decisions with uncanny accuracy. He would enter theta consciousness and experience himself living through the consequences of each potential choice, paying attention to the emotional and practical outcomes of different paths. This gave him what appeared to be supernatural intuition about which decisions would lead to success and which would result in problems. Perhaps the most controversial of Bob's secret techniques was what he called consciousness implantation. Bob discovered that theta states made the mind extremely receptive to new beliefs and programming, but he took this understanding much further than simple affirmations or visualization. He developed methods for implanting completely new personality traits, skills, and capabilities directly into his subconscious mind. For example, when Bob needed to develop public speaking abilities for his growing seminar business, he didn't just practice speaking techniques. Instead, he would enter theta consciousness and literally download the personality characteristics of master speakers whose work he admired. He would study videos of great orators, then use his consciousness engineering techniques to implant their confidence, timing, and presentation skills directly into his own subconscious programming. This technique allowed Bob to develop new capabilities with extraordinary speed, acquiring complex skills in weeks that normally took years to master. However, he recognized that this method required careful integration to avoid creating personality conflicts or psychological instability. Bob's environmental manipulation techniques were equally sophisticated. He understood that consciousness is heavily influenced by external stimuli, so he designed his living and working spaces to support his desired mental states. His home office was arranged according to specific color schemes, lighting patterns, and spatial configurations that had been proven to enhance theta brainwave production. Even his choice of music, clothing, and daily routines were selected based on their ability to maintain the success-oriented consciousness he had created through his morning protocols. Bob treated every aspect of his environment as a tool for consciousness engineering, creating a lifestyle that constantly reinforced his desired identity and beliefs. Perhaps most significantly, Bob developed techniques for social reality anchoring, methods for influencing how others perceived and interacted with him. By maintaining specific postures, vocal patterns, and energy signatures that he had programmed during his theta sessions, Bob could project an aura of success and authority that caused people to automatically treat him as the successful person he was becoming, even before his external circumstances fully reflected that reality. These advanced techniques remained secret because Bob understood their potential for misuse. In the wrong hands, methods for memory revision, decision-making enhancement, and consciousness implantation could be used to manipulate others or create psychological instability in practitioners who weren't adequately prepared. Bob often wrestled with the ethical implications of possessing such powerful knowledge. He had discovered methods that could fundamentally transform human consciousness and capabilities, but he also understood that sharing them widely without proper preparation and context could cause more harm than good. This moral dilemma influenced every aspect of his teaching career and explained why his public methods were always simplified versions of his complete system. Why he kept these secrets. As Bob Proctor's influence grew throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he faced an increasingly difficult moral dilemma that would shape the rest of his career. The consciousness engineering techniques that had transformed his own life were producing extraordinary results for the small number of people he had taught them to privately. But Bob had also witnessed the devastating consequences when these methods were applied incorrectly or by individuals who weren't psychologically prepared for such rapid transformation. The first warning came from Dr. Michael Harrison, a psychiatrist from Chicago, who had learned Bob's complete system during an intensive private consultation in 1974. Dr. Harrison had requested the advanced techniques to help treat patients with severe depression and anxiety disorders, believing that consciousness reprogramming might offer more effective solutions than traditional therapy. Initially, the results seemed miraculous. Patients who had been struggling with limiting beliefs and self-destructive behaviors for decades showed dramatic improvement after just a few sessions using Bob's methods. But within 6 months, Dr. Harrison began reporting troubling side effects. Several patients had experienced what he described as identity dissolution. They had become so disconnected from their original personalities that they were struggling to maintain stable relationships and consistent behavior patterns. The methods worked too well, Dr. Harrison told Bob during a concerned phone call. These people have essentially become different human beings, but they haven't developed the psychological foundation to support their new identities. We're seeing cases of severe anxiety, relationship breakdowns, and in 2 instances, complete psychological breakdowns requiring hospitalization. This report shook Bob deeply. The techniques that had liberated him from limitation and poverty were apparently causing serious psychological damage when applied to people who hadn't undergone the gradual preparation and integration process that had characterized his own transformation. Bob realized that his methods weren't just personal development techniques, they were powerful tools for consciousness manipulation that required the same caution and ethical oversight as medical procedures. The second warning came from Bob's own family. His brother Michael had begged to learn the advanced techniques after watching Bob's extraordinary success, but when Bob finally agreed to teach him a simplified version of the system, the results were disastrous. Michael became obsessed with the practices, spending hours each day in theta consciousness and gradually losing touch with practical responsibilities and relationships. "He's not the same person anymore," Bob's mother told him during a family crisis meeting. "Michael talks like he's some kind of enlightened being, but he can't hold a job and his wife is threatening to leave him. Whatever you taught him has made him completely disconnected from reality." Bob was forced to intervene, spending months helping Michael integrate his consciousness work with practical living and gradually reducing his brother's obsession with the advanced techniques. The experience taught Bob that rapid consciousness transformation without corresponding life skills and psychological maturity could create more problems than it solved. Perhaps the most troubling incident occurred in 1978 when Bob discovered that one of his advanced students, a businessman named Richard Coleman, had been using the consciousness implantation techniques to manipulate employees and business partners. Coleman had learned to project authority and trustworthiness so effectively that he was essentially hypnotizing people into making decisions that benefited him at their expense. "You've created a monster," Coleman's former business partner accused Bob during a heated confrontation. "Richard convinced me to invest my life savings in his company using some kind of mind control technique he learned from you. I agreed to things I would never normally consider, and now I've lost everything." Bob realized that his techniques for consciousness engineering could be weaponized by individuals with unethical intentions. The same methods that could help someone overcome limiting beliefs and achieve legitimate success could also be used to manipulate others and gain unfair advantages in business and personal relationships. These experiences taught Bob that true transformation required not just powerful techniques, but also moral development and psychological maturity. The consciousness engineering methods he had developed were like surgical instruments, incredibly effective when used properly, but potentially devastating in inexperienced or unethical hands. This understanding led Bob to fundamentally restructure his approach to teaching. Instead of sharing his complete system, he began offering simplified versions that were safer for general use, while keeping the most powerful techniques reserved for individuals who had demonstrated both the psychological stability and ethical integrity to use them responsibly. Bob's high prices and selective admission criteria weren't just about exclusivity. They were protective measures designed to ensure that only serious, committed individuals gained access to advanced consciousness engineering techniques. He required extensive preliminary work, psychological evaluation, and character assessment before agreeing to teach anyone his complete system. "I've learned that knowledge without wisdom is dangerous," Bob explained to Linda during one of their evening conversations about his teaching philosophy. "These techniques can transform lives, but they can also destroy them if they're not applied with proper understanding and ethical grounding. My responsibility isn't just to share what I know, but to make sure it's shared safely." This moral framework explained many of the seeming contradictions in Bob's career, why he became wealthy teaching success principles while keeping his most effective methods secret, why his prices were so high that only a select few could afford his advanced training, and why he often seemed to be holding back information during his public presentations. Bob understood that he possessed knowledge that could revolutionize human potential, but he also knew that the same knowledge could cause tremendous harm if distributed without proper safeguards. This tension between the desire to help as many people as possible and the responsibility to protect them from techniques they weren't prepared to handle became the defining characteristic of his entire teaching career. Conclusion: the secret behind Bob Proctor's transformation wasn't just a method. It was a complete science of human consciousness reprogramming that he developed through decades of personal experimentation and refinement. What appeared to be a simple story of determination and positive thinking was actually a sophisticated application of neuroscience principles that most people never learn and many would find difficult to believe. Bob's discovery that human consciousness could be systematically optimized through specific techniques represented one of the most significant breakthroughs in personal development history. The 7-step protocol he developed, the advanced techniques he kept secret, and the ethical framework he created for sharing this knowledge constitute a body of work that could revolutionize how we understand human potential. But Bob's story also reveals the profound responsibility that comes with possessing such powerful knowledge. His decision to keep his most effective techniques secret wasn't about maintaining competitive advantage or creating artificial scarcity. It was about protecting people from methods that could be psychologically destabilizing or ethically dangerous if misapplied. The question that Bob's legacy poses to each of us is not just whether we want to achieve extraordinary success, but whether we are prepared for the level of personal responsibility and ethical integrity that such achievement requires. The consciousness engineering techniques that transformed Bob's life are available to anyone willing to learn them, but they demand the same careful application and moral consideration that he brought to their development. Perhaps the most important lesson from Bob Proctor's secret methods is that true transformation isn't just about changing external circumstances. It's about becoming the kind of person who is capable of creating and maintaining extraordinary results while using that power responsibly and ethically. Now that you know these secrets, the question becomes, do you have the discipline and courage to apply them in your own life? Or will you continue living like most people, knowing the formula for success but never putting it into practice? Which of these secrets most captured your attention? Share in the comments below and subscribe to our channel to discover more hidden methods from history's greatest transformers. Click the next video to learn about other secrets that changed the world.